Hey, everybody. Thank y'all for joining us again for another episode of Pursuit of Purpose. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we have with us a very special guest. He's a kind of a local celebrity. I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Hey, everybody. Elton Hollis. I like that introduction.
Yeah.
Local celebrity. I don't know if I agree with it, but
You should have brought your belt with you.
I should have.
Your champion belt.
Man, if I could have carried that through that door right there, it would have been a great entrance when Chuck walked in, but it would have been all right.
You could have walked in with a cape and the belt like Randy the Macho Man, Savage.
And that was Slim Jim. I'd been ready to go. Man, I enjoy being on the show. This is great. Like I said, Elton Hollis, General Manager of RTR Technical over in Nederland, Texas, owner of Holtec Resources. And what a lot of people have seen me with is being a co-founder along with my business partner, Travis Woods, of the Golden Triangle Industrial Group. So it's, man, I don't have a lot of free time, but I work a lot better that way.
Well, it's funny you said that. Time is the one thing that ain't free.
Yeah,
It's the one thing we have the least of.
Right.
It's the one resource we can't renew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything else we can renew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
No, it is great. You can't get it back. That's for sure.
So
Do the most you can with it.
you talked about a couple of things there. So tell us exactly what you do.
Okay. So I just have fun. I really do. I really do, man.
I bet there's a lot of people ready to apply for that job.
It's a blast. It's a blast. I got it with a resume, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, I'll take you through kind of the journey of what it led to. Grew up Port Arthur, Texas. A lot of people relate me to Kirbyville just because of some things, and I did graduate there. But Port Arthur, Texas, Dad was in the construction industry in the early '80s, which was probably not the best time to be in this area. So we were not the high-ranking individuals, living high on the hog in the early '80s. But man, had a great time. Learned a lot of things. Drank from the water hose. All that other stuff. Pushed your lawnmower underneath the house to keep it from getting
Heck yeah, man.
all that good stuff builds character. But that was the kind of thing that started out with. And in those days, I don't remember anything being difficult. I remember no TV for a year and a half. That was a little different as a kid, and I know younger folks that are listening or watching are probably like, oh man, we don't watch TV anyway. Well, that's kind of like not having your cell phone for a year.
Yeah, the modern equivalent to being without technology.
That's right. So I remember stuff like that, but I really didn't know we were poor or not so well to do until after I grew up a little bit. And then you look back and you're like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? You drive by your old house and you're thinking, okay, man, this was a decent house. We had AC.
Your memories are decent.
And you go back and you're like, man, and you look back and you think about these things.
Right.
And that's kind of what happens with my work. I started in the industry working with my dad. And of course, like everybody else, every time he mentioned something, I soaked it right in. Didn't he have to say it 2 or 3 times? Yeah, right.
Right.
We're driving back and forth from Kirbyville, and he's like cramming stuff into me, and I'm like, I'm never going to use this. But that's what happened. I started visiting with him and graduated and realized the construction industry, what I thought was what you did if you couldn't make it in college or you didn't have good grades. That's what I thought the blue collar world was. And it was not that. It was
not at
not
all.
just a concrete guy or an electrician or a plumber or heavy equipment operator. That wasn't our plant operator. I didn't know what those folks made. I didn't know the sub levels underneath there of what they did. So once I got into the business and started visiting with folks, I went from somebody that wanted 1 pair of boots, 1 pair of tennis shoes, a couple pair of pants, and some t-shirts in my closet, no drive. I didn't want any of that stuff. Just secondhand pickup truck. I didn't have any ambition for probably 3 or 4 years. And then I married young, had a couple kids, and you start wanting to provide for somebody, but it doesn't always mean that you grab your ambition and take off with it.
That's right.
And man, when I started learning things, and I didn't get a degree. I didn't do that other stuff. But when I started falling in love with learning things, taking a class and realizing it wasn't staying up all night, it wasn't doing anything else. It was listening and then seeing how it fell into place. Oh man, I was hooked after that.
You were learning the application of
That's right.
knowledge, not just learning the knowledge.
Yeah. And then you wake up and you start looking around and you're like, okay, there are 150 different subtitles and things that tie into the blue collar world that I never was aware of in high school. And just from starting the process, you know what I mean? A lot of people say your starter's broke, and that's the biggest problem with people. Once they start something,
Right.
they're okay. It's just getting started. And
Right.
and that's what happened. I started doing things, started learning, taking some certificate courses. Mason Construction, who I grew up with, they were great about paying for your training. You wanted to do this? Hey, we're all about it. You want to come to the office on a Saturday, and we'll pay you to take the training? I was all about it.
There you go.
And I started learning how to learn that way while making money. And man, I just got hooked. And it was something that I still haven't turned loose of.
Sounds to me like you very eloquently put that, by the way, but it sounds to me like what you did is you built yourself a foundation of pure curiosity. You learned how to be curious and how to thrive in a learner's mindset, like a permanent learner.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the Ted Lasso thing where it says, hey, and he quotes Walt Whitman and he says, talk about being judgmental. Don't be judgmental, be curious.
That's it.
And I thought about that because I'll be honest with you, a lot of times I have a tendency to be judgmental.
Don't we all?
And I will look at it and not like, man, your nose is crooked. Not that mine is, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm judging something. I'm looking at it. I was like, okay, that'd be a little bit better. Or why wouldn't they do it this way? Same way have learned and continue to learn to change that and be a little curious and be like, why did this business do this?
Right.
Or why are they paying for this when there's something that they could do it a little better this way? And then I changed that into dealing with people. I fell in love with learning and doing this stuff. And then I had people that were in my charge, a couple people underneath me, and I'm doing something. And the first little foreman job I got, fired everybody. You know what I mean? And I was like, you know what? I can do it better now than people. Let me do it.
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
You had to learn real quick, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a tough lesson. Woo! You run everybody off. What do you got to do? You got to do the work. Deadlines don't change. You got to do all the work all by yourself, So quick, tough lesson. Like about dealing with people is, okay, you're going to have to put up with some people. And then you realize it's real easy to have all the answers when you're not doing every piece of the work. When you're down there and in the mud and you're face down in the concrete trying to finish this stuff, you start realizing, okay, it's not so easy to have that 30,000 view and coordinate everything. So it was a tough, quick lesson, learn quick, and you learn to rely on people and be like, okay, if you will help me out here, even though you're doing it not the way that I probably would, please take care of this.
Right.
But what it sounds to me like what you really learned was you don't want to have all the answers. You want to have all the questions.
Absolutely. Well, they say a great person has, how's it go? A great person has all the answers, and a magnificent person or genius has all the questions.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So it's one of those things where I learned that stuff, and I also learned the construction industry taught me how to deal with diversity. Not just necessarily the color of skin, it just people thinking different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the value in that.
Absolutely. Because my way may be censored on, hey, this is what we're looking at. And this is the way I was taught, like the whole farce of common sense. It's a great word and it sounds good. And I know I have used it 100 million times, but it's truly common knowledge. I may view something as common sense. Somebody else may not have been taught that by their dad or by their mother or their grandmother.
Their environment, whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing that we can only see what we see.
Yes.
And you're only going to acknowledge what you have inherited the ability to see, whether it be from instruction, just purely environmental, or whatever your perspective was built on. So that's really brilliant, the way you put that.
Right.
So thank you for telling us about your journey and how you got to where you are. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. You grew up in Port Arthur.
I did.
Or you were? Was that your young childhood
It
in
was.
Port Arthur?
Yeah, it was. So from my first memories was Port Arthur, and man, we were blessed with some great neighbors. You know what I mean? I enjoyed my childhood. I have two younger sisters. My dad worked in the construction industry, and my mom kind of stayed home and raised us, which was, I think, invaluable. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Um, it was nice to have someone home to deal with us when we were younger. But it also taught me the difference. She later went, it was Lamar University, Port Arthur then.
Right.
Once us kids got into school and got situated, she would work because she always wanted to work. So she would work at the daycares when we would go there. Okay. So she could still be with us, but she was still making money. And you know, early 80s, that's when you started to have that two income family. But what she did is you always could tell she wanted to do something a little more. So she went to Lamar University, Port Arthur, and wanted to become a teacher. And that's when I started getting into junior high, you know, early junior high. And man, I remember her studying like crazy. You know, everything was written on paper. She had this, the big recorders, and she would record lessons. And I remember falling to sleep to listening to those recordings of her. Yeah. But I watched her work just as hard as my dad did. And man, I got to see a dynamic that I think a lot of kids didn't get to see. Right. And I got to see my dad, who was the rugged, come home dirty, you know, worked outside all the time, fall asleep in the recliner with his boots off. You know, I got to see that guy do things like wash dishes and mop floors and do things because my mom was studying. He always, like Saturdays, man, he would cook breakfast. He would do things like that. But to watch him do that because my mom was doing that,
he was being totally supportive.
Oh yeah, that's when you see stuff like that. I took it for granted but now when I talk to people, and in my own family, when I look around, I'm like, how many people haven't got to see that kind of stuff?
Right.
You know, and
what a team. That's
yeah,
awesome.
It is great. They're still together. They are still amazing. But I look at that stuff and I'm like, oh, I see little bitty things like that, or layoff days or rain out days. You know, when we were kids, that was our favorite days, because if dad was home, you know, it was a blast. You know, I mean, we were playing games. He would come in there and wake us up, pull all the covers off, you know, always had some kind of big breakfast going. We didn't realize he wasn't making any money. And just the fact that he could not be making any money in those times and come home and sit in the driveway for a second and pull himself together and then come in the door and be all excited. I never realized that until I became.
That's a man's man right there.
It's like, whew, that's not easy to do, you know.
Right.
So man, that was the early years, and that was something that I wouldn't realize until I had my own family, how that would come back and be like, I didn't realize how valuable that kind of stuff was.
What was discipline like in your childhood home? Did you get a lot of whoopings?
I didn't get near as much as I deserved. I had two little sisters, and I am telling you, if there is one thing I am good at, it is picking on people, and it is because I had two little sisters. I tell you, I never once, and I know people say this, and not just because they could hear this, but I don't think I ever felt unloved in my whole life with my parents. I felt angry at them times, and I felt times whenever I was like, okay, that was a little rough, but I felt like I got the discipline when I needed it. And I felt like the discipline was what it should have been, whether it was a whipping or whether it was a talking to or whether it was anything else. I look back and I could see they were doing the best that they could. And I remember them telling me one time when I had my kids, you're going to have to learn the discipline that works for your kids. You know, you can't just whoop all of them, or you can't just ground all of them. You know, they're going to change differently. And I would see that, you know, I would see that differently with my siblings. You know, some things I didn't like I thought I got treated pretty fairly. And then when I move out, when I'm 18 years old, you know, we always had the little bitty cheap Walmart lawnmower, push, not no self-propelled. I'm talking about push with a carbon handle that was all rusted. You know,
you were the self-propelled.
Yeah, that's right. And then I'm 18 years old and I'm moving out of the house, and here comes my dad with a riding mower in the back of the truck. What's that?
He had to replace you.
I mean, I'm gonna have to mow now.
Yeah.
I was like, but no, it was good.
That's great.
I'm naming this one Elton Hollis.
Yeah, that's right.
This
That's
one's
right. But you know, I think the things that stuck with me is a lot of times you hear people pick about, hey, this is going to hurt me worse than it did you, or things like that. I mean, I got those talkings too as well, but the level of discussion, you know, when they would sit down and they would talk to me about things, you know, and they would visit with me about things as a kid, as a junior high and a high school, that I appreciated very much. And I tried to do that with my kids. There were some times when, and it's this way in life, when things are just right now, it's just because I said, and I got those. But usually it might be 2 days later when we're riding in a pickup, which is usually what happened with my dad. If we were going to discuss something, especially when we rode to work together, the deep discussions usually happen when we're outside walking somewhere, or when we were traveling somewhere in the pickup truck. And I still do that today.
Right.
When I want to have that kind of discussion, it's easier for me to talk in a pickup truck.
Yeah.
You know,
Heck yeah, man.
But you kind of got that captive audience. That's
right.
one thing. And what I heard you say, he had a pretty good instinct on that delayed effect. Like if I talk to him right now, he ain't gonna hear it because he's all upset.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, though, he'll hear everything I say.
He knew me well, for sure.
That's brilliant. That's
sure.
good. That's some good daddy right there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good stuff.
I really did. I'm blessed. I look back and I know people. I really get tore up sometimes these days when I feel like people are blaming their parents, and they're telling other people about it, because I want to ask them if they've talked to their parents about it. You know what I mean? And I've tried to come to. I know I was raised in the same household as my sisters, same exact household, but we're three different people, and we were raised three different ways. But there's some commonalities about everything that we did.
Absolutely.
And when I talk to people that didn't have that, man, I have a whole new appreciation for what's going on out there, and learning that, and those people having to work and deal with those kind of issues, it gives you a greater appreciation for people's attitude out there.
Right. Just last night, I'm talking to this teenager, and I've been talking to him as folks finally came in to update me on all the reasons he's here. And so I get their report and get them out. He stays in for a few more minutes, and I said, so tell me what you think. He goes, man, my parents are unfair. I go, unfair or uncare? And he went,
there you go.
He goes, well, I said, well, I guess both. I go, oh, can you prove they don't care? He's like, I don't think I can. I go, well, then they do. Now, they may not do it the way you prefer, but they do. He's like, and that's when he's looking at you, and then he looks at the floor. I'm like, got him. I'm thinking about it, you know. It's one of my favorite things. And, you know, it's just a simple question, you know, but if it gets them thinking. So, of course, it felt unfair.
Sure.
But I never thought they didn't care. Mine either. I'm sure none of us, we can all say that, you know, to some degree.
Absolutely right. I try to deal with that when I deal with folks that I work with. You know, whether they're 40 years old or 18 years old, I try to tell them all the time, look, when we're visiting with you, especially at RT, small company, 20 people, when we're talking to you and we're trying to correct an issue, or we're visiting with you about something, that's because we care.
That's it.
If somebody in the field is telling you, hey, you didn't do this right, we got to get this. Hey, I'm expecting more. If they're talking to you and dealing with you, man, don't take offense to that.
No.
You know what I mean? That they're trying to get something to change. That's not what's bad. What's bad is when they don't
talk
say
to you.
it.
That's it.
Right.
That's exactly right.
You know, and I don't want to bring up any hot button topics or anything, but it's just like, you know, the whole bullying thing, you know, like we talked about in school. I was a little bitty tiny thing. My nose has been the same size since I was 6 months old. I'm telling you, man, I could probably smoke a cigar in the shower and never get it wet. I mean, I get how that is, you know.
That's good.
I've been picked on and everything else, and I didn't like it at the time. But you know what would have hurt me more, and I think the times back when would really bother me, and even as an adult, if I go somewhere and people don't talk to me, or you don't feel included, to me that is the worst.
Oh yeah.
Right.
It's way better to be picked on than be talked about behind your back.
Or have people that, if they expect something out of you, you know, try to give a little bit of patience and see what that person's trying to grab at.
Yeah.
They may not give it to you the right way, or they may be, there may be 100 things on their mind, especially if you're supervising people or you own a company or something. Man, you got so much on your shoulders to stop and visit and do things like that. You're not always going to say it the right way.
Well, I want to say something because you very well laid out your story of how you were parented. And I'd like to point something out for our audience, that if you're a parent, if you got kids, you don't have to over or hyper focus on being a parent. You can actually live in front of your kids. Let them see you just adult, just the act of adulting with each other. Two adult people living together as a supportive network for each other is one of the most powerful things that a kid can ever witness.
Right.
And you just illustrated, like, I'm not going to embarrass. Well, yes, I am. How old are you?
46.
That ain't embarrassing. So you're 46 years old and you look at the memories of watching your dad wash dishes while your mom studied. They weren't parenting you at that moment, but they were living an example. They were living an example in front of you as the greatest witness of how to be supportive of one another. They invested into you by showing you what to do. That's beautiful, man. So I hope your parents get to hear this and they hear how you honored them with that story. That was
me too, because I want to go eat over there Saturday.
Right. I'm not afraid to feed myself. My name is Robert Martin. Try to get me.
I hope I'm welcome back.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because my dad and I have very different personalities when it comes to the public and outspoken. He is more of a reserved individual. He's still hilarious. He's a very funny guy. He's great. He's got a great outlook on things. Has the greatest timing on jokes, which him and my grandpa, I wish I could emulate that. I'm still trying to perfect it, but my dad is more of a reserved guy. So when I started coming out of high school and I got into drama a little bit when I was not that kind of drama, like the actual class.
I knew what you meant.
So I get in, I start coming out of my shell a little bit, man. There was times where he was like, "Oh man, what is this guy doing?" And he was a little bit more vocal than my mom. But it is one of those things where I've watched him adapt with that well too. Where he's like, "Okay, I know this is your thing, but you have to be careful. The more you put yourself out there, the easier a target you're going to be." So he was always there with that little gentle reminder, but it's funny because I look at that and most people would say, well, that's probably stopped you from doing a lot of things. And it really hasn't. There was a time when I realized I had done some things, said some things, not been truthful as a 17 or 18-year-old. Could you imagine that? Not been truthful.
I can't imagine that at all. That's so foreign to me.
Because of disappointment. But as a young man, I think when my parents saw that and they addressed the issue instead of leaving it alone, it kind of opens you up a little bit. And when something happens that you think is going to disappoint them and the world doesn't end and they still love you all the same and everything's, they're still there for you, because you're going to mess up and then you're going to need them like 32 seconds after you mess up, right? It's never 6 years down the road. It's always like right afterwards. Right. So when you see that, it's like, oh, great. The world didn't end. Okay, This is how this works.
Yeah.
It's that same way. We are different in that way, but he's always been like, if you need me to be there, I'll be there. If this is what happens, or I'll visit with him and then I'll come away and I'll be like, oh, he did hear me say that, or he has noticed this on social media. Or he'll put, like a small comment there, just like, kind of like, hey, I'm watching, or I'm looking.
Right.
And that, to me, that's the greatest thing. It's nice to have that support, even though I know that's not his comfort zone.
So, that's amazing, and that kind of segues into this, since he was more reserved, as you say, and he was so complimentary to your life, and so was your mom. But coming up through their upbringing and into your adulthood, looking back, who would you say, maybe if it was outside your parents, who would you say was your biggest influencer or mentor in your life?
Before 18 or after 18?
That's up to you. The person who had the most profound impact on you and your course as a man.
I think, and I'm gonna do both if you don't mind.
No, please.
Before 18, if you would have asked me then, I would have said my grandpa. Which I think happens a lot.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Young men, especially in this area,
Right.
And in the blue collar world. But I would have answered that it was my grandpa. You know, he was cool. He worked at the refinery. The guy could hunt. He had all these stories about what he did. He was a funny guy. You know, I mean, just a lot of good things about him. Knew all kind of stuff. You know, it was like you couldn't, and you didn't have the internet to prove him wrong, even if he was wrong.
Right.
And he said it with confidence, so must have been true. But I would have said that. The crazy thing is, after 18, you start to realize, you know, I'm getting into 20 and 25 and 30. You start to realize I really did love my grandpa a lot. But what I liked and what I was really doing is I was really following the lead of and watching my father. It was just more popular to put it with my grandpa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because this is the guy that was, that gave me the whooping or wouldn't let me go do this or wouldn't give me the $20 to fill up. Isn't that crazy? $20 to fill up fuel tank. But, you know, those kind of things, you know, because they're doing that to you at the moment. But all the things that I liked about him was the things that I liked about my dad. So as far as that, the hard work, the how to be a man, wanting to be a father, wanting to be that was definitely those two guys. But it was always looking at the core ethics of what made my dad the kind of guy I wanted to be. And then same thing with my mom, her strength and the way she put up with my dad and being poor and some of the decisions. And he'll tell you that some of his decisions when they were younger were not always the right decisions. And there's some things that he'll get a vision and she may not totally understand it and she will follow it. You know what I mean? And that's, to me, everybody concentrates on leading and sometimes they don't understand that following is just as important.
It's very much as important.
Well, it takes a tremendous amount of self-confidence to be a follower.
Absolutely.
It's not a weakness by any means.
Yep. And there's that supporting that person that you're following.
That's right.
You know, I was a big baseball guy, loved baseball, played outfield, and everybody was like, why do you like playing outfield? I said, well, it's not boring. He was like, no, outfield is boring. I said, outfield is boring because you're not backing up your infield.
That's right.
Yes. You know what I mean? But if you make a play and you catch a ball in center field or you dive, that's great. But man, that second baseman misses it, or you've got an errant throw to first base and you're back there in right field and you catch it and that guy can't advance. You know what I mean? Same way in life. If you've got somebody in front of you, whether it's your parents, whether it's Casey Taylor, the owner of RTR Technical, you know, she has a totally different skill set than I do. But if she's up there and there's something I disagree with, you know, as her second in command, I have to be like, okay, I need to process this. I'm going to follow her through the process. But when we're done, I'm going to be like, I'm going to need you to explain this to me a little bit. Where are we headed here? You know, knowing when to have those deals or knowing how to back that person up whenever you're in a room and they're not there.
Yeah, there's a coach for years. We've all participated in sports and stuff. And there's coachable things, but there's also natural instincts. And we've seen it in certain positions. Some guys are just built to be right tackles. That's just the way their body works, the way their brain works. And an outfielder like that is built for that. Went to see a college basketball game just this last weekend. And, you know, the second half, they're getting in their groove. And almost probably like 3 out of 4 scores in a row, it was a backup guy. So a guy goes to do a layup, but some guy instinctively followed him in. And he was the big 6'9" kid, followed the little guard shoot, and he got rebound. And I turned to my friend and I said, did you see what just happened? And I explained instinctively he backed him up. Now I'm sure there were some drills, but he accepted it. Like, that's my role. They're not going to throw me the ball. I'm going to back up the guy, and he got what 6 points in minutes, just minutes. But I'll go back to your grandpa real quick.
Yep.
I think I understand why you and grandpa got along so well. It's because during those pre-18 years, y'all had a common enemy.
Yes.
Yeah.
it did. And it's crazy. Look, that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way, but we did, because now my grandpa, who was I probably can't say those colorful words, but he was a difficult person to deal with sometimes. But if you talk to anybody that was at Fino when they worked with him, you really, really loved him to death, or you didn't like him at all. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And my dad has an ability to work in between those parameters, probably because my grandpa was the other way. Mm-hmm. But as a kid, you kind of like that. You look at that and you think that's kind of cool. You don't realize that it's a lot more valuable to be the other way. But there was a lot of times when he would take my side in front of me. Now, he probably didn't when I left the room. You know what I mean? They probably talked about me when I left the room. But you're right. There was a lot of times that I could see that he would tell me something like, hey, you shouldn't be so rough on that boy, or stuff like that. And I understand that now, because my dad is like the softest man ever when it comes to my grandkids and my kids. I'm like, what is going on? Who is this man?
The dad that raised me.
Yeah, I was like, what happened to you? Yes. But that's one of those things where I look at it and I say, hey, what are we going to do in work whenever you make that change? You're the tough individual in leadership, and you learn something. You go to these classes, you learn something in leadership. Do we have the ability to make that jump and say, okay, I've been doing this for 10 years and now I learned something differently. Now I'm going to treat people a little bit differently. I was thinking about that a couple weekends ago, about how to watch my dad, my mom, my parents change and be softer and more loving. And I think that changes because the world changes a little bit. Grandparents are more important these days than they ever been.
Almost certain. And their world has changed. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, when it was just, the five of you there, and you guys were, the littles that had to have meals every day and all that, totally different. And then when the grands come along, I mean, so that to me speaks well of folks to be able to have that adaptability, that versatility, just keep broadening my game.
Yep.
And if it causes me to soften a little bit among certain people like grandchildren, well, then good. It's good. They've earned it, because I know what they're putting up with.
Yeah, that's right. I tell you, my dad has this saying he told me, and he said, if I would have known that grandkids were so great, I'd have just had them first.
Right.
Well, I appreciate that. But then I had grandkids. I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I had them first. Yes.
Oh.
Well, back to the concept of leadership.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, and that's a very important part of what we do here at Pursuit of Purpose. And when a lot of times when people come to us for leadership training or coaching or whatever it may be, something they have to be taught is that you cannot lead until you follow, until you effectively follow.
Absolutely.
And that's a concept people don't really expect. Like they think that, well, once I'm a leader, it's easy. Once I become a leader, it's all, everything's good. I get the golden goose and all the eggs and everything that goes with it. That's absolutely false.
Right.
It looks good on TikTok.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or the YouTube shorts and stuff like that. But you're exactly right. It's the same way. I went into the Houston area for a little bit and worked there for, 7-8 years. And I enjoyed my time there. But what I learned to do there is it kind of gave me a fresh start. Here, I was kind of under my dad's shadow a little bit. And he's actually the one that saw that. Grew up in Mason Construction, great company to grow up in, learned a ton from my dad. He put me with, they had the best surveyors on the job, you go work with them. Best heavy equipment operator. I didn't know what he was doing. And usually it was the one that would work me the hardest because they were the best. But that came in, play a lot, and it helped me out. But when I went to a whole different area where no one knew me and took a job where no one knew me, those things automatically kicked in from the time I interviewed. I went in to apply at a pipeline contractor job. I walked in there to apply for, I just want to be a traco operator. I didn't want any stress, didn't want anything else, just want to be a traco operator. So I go in there and I sit at the guy's desk, and there's a set of prints out there for some drill shafts. So I'm looking at it, waiting on the guy to get in there, and he comes in and he goes, "You know what you're looking at?" I said, "Yes, sir." Set of prints for a drill shaft. And he was like, he said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, that's what that is." He said, "Can you tell me how deep they are?" And I said, "Yes, sir, 30 feet deep." And he goes, "Well, you're close." He said, "They're 15 foot," but he said, "Hey, that's good. I give you an A for effort." I looked and I said, "I believe you're wrong. I believe they're 30 foot deep." And he goes, "Well, hang on now. I just gave you a compliment. Now you're going to tell me I'm wrong. I'm looking. I see the 15 foot." And I said, "You are absolutely right. And if you'll turn the page over, it continues on the other side. That's what the little mark here." And he was like, "You passed that test, you know."
That's a great story.
But it's that. And I ended up getting a job that day. He took me over, talked me to the owner of the company.
You wasn't on Traco though, were you?
No, I was leading the concrete crew. That is the perfect example of what happens. You know what I mean? You just sit there and you learn these things, and you're sitting looking at a set of drawings one day, and you're having a conversation with somebody. I could have just said the guy was right. I could have told him I don't know what I'm looking at. I could have been whatever. But instinctively, I just answered the questions, you know, and that stuff happens. And it led to a lot of things. That same company that I worked for, the owner's daughter came to work for him as he was starting to get the company ready to sell, which got me into safety. She said, "Hey, you know how to do safety?" And I was like, "Well, I got all these safety classes that I took with Mason Construction, but I've never been a safety guy." And she's like, "Well, you interested in it?" My, word for word, "Is my paycheck going to go down?" "No, it's probably going to go up a little bit." "Absolutely, I can be a safety."
That's right.
And we actually ended up starting a safety company together. Oh. She had the white collar training. She was an educator. She knew some of the things that I didn't. She had the opportunity with her dad owning a company and stuff like that. And you start with stuff like that. And it's crazy how that stuff just keeps going like that, and then I go to work for a client of ours whenever that journey was over, and so those kind of things are fun, but all of that happened from following. I was following a set of prints, you know what I mean? And then, okay, this is what we're doing. And then I'm following a journey, and that journey takes a turn. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go to work for these people. Never as the head honcho, always working for somebody else. And when I worked for them, I remember when I worked at Mason, there was a superintendent that pulled me aside one day and tore me up. And he said, "You're a very intelligent guy and you're an extremely hard worker." He said, "But sometimes I need you to not say anything and just do the work." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" "I'm just trying. I think it's goofy the way we're doing this." He said, "That's okay. I need you to tell me that when we're not standing in front of a bunch of people." And he said, "You will be surprised what will happen if you will just try to take somebody else's plan and make it work." And I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'll give it a try." And I did. And just after he tore me up 2 days later, I had to work my tail off to make this thing work. And sure enough, halfway through, I saw where he was going with it. And he was right. And he wasn't very much older than me. And he was a lot cockier than me, but he was right. And somebody had taught him. But when that happened, man, it sunk in. And I started doing that. And it has not failed me.
It's a valuable lesson.
It was
valuable.
It's amazing. You push somebody else, you help somebody else succeed like that. And it is amazing. Yes. And I don't mind being the tip of the spear and stuff like that. Yeah. But man, you get a lot more internal joy and just peace when you can see somebody else succeed because of something you put in or helped them do. That is an amazing feeling.
That's good.
It's very good stuff. So what year did you get married?
Which time?
Oh, well, this time.
All right. So
we ain't living in the past. We're living in the now.
I am not married, but my girlfriend is tougher than I am. She's tougher than I am. So we'll just say that I am tied down.
You're caught. You ain't cleaned yet.
Yeah, and we've been together for a little over 3 years.
Okay, that's fine. That's very good.
And boy, you talk about somebody intelligent. She really is amazing. She works for Coca-Cola. We pick on her and say she's a Coke dealer all the time, but
That's good stuff.
but that's funny. I talk about her. She really is. She's a highly intelligent person, and she has worked her tail off. I think she's been with them for 14 years.
What's she do for Coke?
She is a commercial market manager, I believe, is what her title
Oh, that
is.
sounds like a big shop.
It is, but it's one of those things. Coca-Cola is kind of like the military. They speak, and if they can put something, and change it into a bunch of letters and mix it all together and try to make it sound good, they will actually do it. So, but essentially, what she does the marketing piece of it and tries to, all the time we'll look at stuff and it's like, okay, I'm designing a new table, or I'm looking at this things for the employees. It's new gifts for the stuff. And she gets so excited about it for a corporate company, and she's never even met these individuals. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm like, I wonder if I could work in a corporate environment to have that kind of discipline and drive. She has that discipline and drive. I do not. I have to know my people because I need new motivation every single day, or every single half a day, probably.
Right.
But it's neat to have that different dynamic with her pushing forward and working for that kind of dynamic, and me having to deal with people all the time to keep me focused. Because if not, man, I'll be off in left field chasing chickens.
How'd y'all meet?
So we had a ton of friends in the Southeast Texas area.
Okay.
And she's been here for a long period of time. And we had run in the same circles, probably have seen each other. And I'd probably seen her because she's, 6 foot tall and beautiful. But I look back and I'm like, I was in the same spot. How did we not meet? So we met through some mutual friends, and she actually resides in Hewitt outside of Waco.
Okay.
So we travel back and forth, but her parents and some of her family's still here. But as we started meeting, everybody was like, oh, hey, you're going to know this guy. Everybody knows this guy. And then we go places, everybody knows her. And I'm like, no, you can't say that about me. We've been stopped 8 times at dinner because of you. So, but it's enjoyable to have that dynamic and to have somebody that doesn't have a job that's even close to yours, but you still have the same challenges.
Y'all have a similar pace.
Yeah, that's right.
Different atmospheres, but similar pace.
That's a good way to put it. It is definitely, it is full speed ahead for sure.
Good.
So is there anybody that you look up to as a successful person right now?
There are several, for a couple different reasons. I think right off the bat, probably the closest ones to me. One is Joe Tant, who is he's now the president of the Port Arthur Chamber. I think his drive for helping people and his relentless energy, which is not sponsored by Starbucks or any other coffee, but I guess it's natural. I don't know what it is, but just his drive to help people and the way he enjoys doing it, whether you are a little tiny business or a really big industrial business. I appreciate that. And he's always the guy that effortlessly helps people. You know what I mean? He could be doing something else and not even think about it and help 10 people in the midst of building a PowerPoint.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Or he'll get something and he is the email king. He will shoot out 40 emails. He's like, I don't know what this is, but it looks like something you could do. Here, take it and run with it.
That's awesome.
Not the guy that keeps it close to the vest and says, okay, maybe I can make $1 on this, or maybe I can.
Right.
Let's put the Greater Port Arthur logo on there. Let's do this stuff. Like, he's shooting you raw information, just whatever I can do, however I can help you. I appreciate people that are genuinely trying to do that. Right. And the team that he assembled, I appreciate people that can assemble a good team. And I think he's done a good job for that. Other than that, Travis Woods, my partner in the Golden Triangle Industrial Group, I rode with him when I left RUS in Channelview. We were a 508-man company. We were bumping about $60 million a year, and I was general manager over there. And I was burnt out, and I was leaving an area, coming back into the Golden Triangle, and I just felt like I needed to humble myself a little bit. You know what I mean? It was a fast pace. It was a rat race over there. There was a lot of things going on, and it wouldn't have blended well with this area. And I rode with Travis for a year in his pickup truck. And if you don't know Travis, he's one of the most humble guys that are out there. But he's also like a cerebral assassin. This guy is always thinking. You know what I mean?
Cerebral assassin.
His brain power is amazing. He just because he got that country draw, don't mean he's not smart. He's going through there, and he's on the phone talking, and I'm listening to the stories, and I'm hearing him, talk to his clients, and this guy's talking on the phone, and people are calling him for advice, and we're visiting clients, and I see what's going on. I'm looking, and I'm like, he's tying his music passion, and getting guitars signed and stuff like that. And I'm going around to all these plant managers and everything, and there's a picture of Travis on the wall, and it's a signed guitar, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's in every one of these offices, and he knows everybody. Just the ability to remember people's names and what they do and things about them, I can appreciate that. But I learned two things from him that I will always keep, and one is, and he is the master of the double negative. One of his sayings is that you don't never know who you're being nice to. You know what I mean? Whether we stopped at the Waffle House before it got wild, or a service station, or wherever we were, Travis treated everybody with respect and kindness. And we might be meeting a safety guy or a gate guard or somebody that couldn't even give us a PO or whatever at the job, and he treated them with just as much dignity and respect. And I've seen that come true for him many, many times.
That's amazing. That's good.
And then probably lastly is, and I talked about Casey a little bit earlier, is I love dealing with people, but sometimes I just don't have that mama heart like women are able to do. You know what I mean? I just don't think it can happen. She has brought that to me, working with her the last 6 years, showed me how that can be a good thing in business, because I used to have to tell her all the time, I was like, you are killing me if you don't quit coddling these guys. You know what? And then I saw that that's just how she is, and when the going got tough, that's what they would do. They would protect her. You know what I mean? And that's what made the guys stay. And that's so I started leaving that alone. And I was like, okay, there is a place for that. How you show that.
Yeah.
And then I realized it wasn't just in work. That's how she treated her family. That's how she did other things. Learning how to deal with people that are different than that, and appreciating her coming from a banking background and jumping into now owning RT Technical and getting into an I&E environment that you had never been in before, with a couple stops along with the SBA and Lamar University. She went into a business that she had never done before, where she can walk in there and be like, okay, this is an ABB 8206, or I know this is what happens here. Or I don't know anything. I can't bend tubing, but I can tell you if that building's complete or not. She is amazing, and it's to watch somebody do that and have that kind of drive. I can appreciate that in this kind of world. She could have very easily do like a lot of businesses and back up and say, I'm going to hire a staff to take care of this for me and not keep my hands on it.
Right.
And she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be able to know everybody that's there. She wanted to be able to care and do things for that. And I have to applaud that, because I can't say that I'd have chose the same way, 6 years ago. I may have been like, it's a whole lot easier to be able to come in at 9 or 10 o'clock whenever you want to, and the business is already running itself. So, so those three folks mainly, and there's a ton of them, but those three, for three very different reasons, have really made a big impact in my life.
That's good.
Well, you've had an amazing journey, a lot of stuff. I mean, you've accomplished a lot of things. You've experienced a lot, and you have this multifaceted life right now. Like all these things you talked about that you do. If you could, what would you say is your favorite thing in a daily, that's like your normal routine? What's your favorite thing that you do?
I love solving problems and helping people. And it is, and I told you I enjoy learning and everything else, and that's all it is. It's learning what's going on. And I think that's what led me to writing the book. I think that's what led me to any speaking things that I've ever done. If you help people solve problems and you genuinely care about people, I don't think there's anything you really can't do.
Well, since you brought it up, tell them where you find your book. Tell them the name of your book.
There's two of them underneath my desk gathering dust. Now, if you look on Amazon, you don't want to read the first one, that was boring. But if you look up Buy Into Yourself First by Elton Hollis, you'll see it. That was quite a journey. It was a fun book to write. It was difficult. It was very challenging, but it really put me in touch when I started putting these things on paper with the journey that I had. And everybody's like, okay, between the safety training and the I&E stuff and the Golden Triangle Industrial Group stuff, how does all that tie together? It was all solving problems. And if I wouldn't have had the people around me to be able to believe in myself and them to believe in me when I couldn't, like the circle of friends I had, you know what I mean? I have two of my friends that are really good friends of mine are in the banking industry, and I can't bank or budget very well. So you know what I mean? So it's about caring about people other than your jobs, but they look at it and they say, look, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's what you're looking at. We see you, we see these things. I take that feedback and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to put out there. Just helping people and doing those things. One of the things I do with LIT, and this is not just a plug, but it is a plug, is
it's not just a plug.
Yeah, just a plug. Is when I started Holtec, everybody said, what do you think has made Holtec successful? And I said, I've done a lot of things for people that I have enjoyed, but the most fun I've ever had is when you can deal with a company and I can walk in and say, okay, here's your problem. You need some safety training. And if you own a construction company or have ever dealt with it, you got to have a ton of safety training between IS Net World and Nevada and OSHA training to get in these plants. You have got to make this happen. You are not getting around it. It's not going away. So here's what happens. You got to train on those things. Well, if you use your internal trainers, people look at it and go, oh, okay, you just pencil whip this. You know what I mean? So you leave yourself open for that. And that person's not out doing their other job. They're training your other people. And your employees see them all the time. So they're not going to pay that much attention to them. So when I looked at it, I was like, okay, I make good money. You know, I bring in and do a training class. I'm like, all right, it's pretty good money. So I started visiting with the LIT folks. We talked about doing the Golden Triangle Industrial Group over at their location. And I said, by the way, you do safety training? I was like, well, yeah, we need to talk. We have safety grants that we're trying to give people. Like we're trying to give them this free money and they don't want to take it. I said, well, there's your first mistake. Quit calling it free money. You know, well, the government giving, oh yeah, quit talking about the government giving you free money, please. Yes. That's not good. Yes. What's the scariest phrase in the world? We're with the government. We're here to help.
Yes. Thank you, Ronald.
But that's one of those things that I enjoyed the most, because now I can go to my clients and say, hey, look, you're paying me a monthly fee to do this. Now I'm going to I'll use RT Technical because I know I can without getting in trouble. $80,000 we spent in safety training before we ever started using these grants. $80,000 for a small $6 million a year company. We spent that money, got hooked up with LIT. We started using the grant to do that. $80,000 off the bottom line, go. That quick.
Yeah.
So it takes a couple months to go through the process. You know what I mean? We had to go through jump some hoops and do things like that. But man, if you can save that much money, you know, you make $1, you don't have $1, you got 70 something cents after you pay everything. You save $1, you got that $1. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And I was like, okay, this works. I started bringing it to other people, HB Neal, Cat Construction, some of the other folks that I work with. And the first time it was like, it's a little too good to be true. Then you start saving that money. Now they're paying you, you're saving them money. You know what I mean? So essentially, the money they're spending on you is a wash.
Yes.
You solved a problem.
You know what? Yeah. Solved a problem.
And help people.
You know, I took their problem, which was me. I'm taking the money away from
them. So you became the solution.
That's right. Because eventually they're going to be like, hey, we've got this figured out. Now we don't need you anymore. So how do I fix that problem? I take away the burden of what I cost. You know what I mean? And it won't end with LFT. I'll have to continually try to find different ways, but that's a perfect example of the resources that are out there.
Absolutely.
And that kind of stuff is what I enjoy, is helping people find that, or they call and say, hey, what can we do about this? Or this may not be safety. Have you ever run into this? Anytime somebody says, I know you do safety, but what about this? Oh man, I I love that kind of stuff. So I think that definitely helping people and solving problems, man, that stuff is just amazing. It keeps me going.
Are you a leader?
I strive to be a leader.
What does it mean to be a leader?
I think a leader is to be less in charge and to understand that you have people in your charge. And I know that's a little bit cliche, and I know it's a popular thing to say, but um, for a very imperfect individual, and anybody that knows me for more than about 7 seconds or sees my social media understands I'm not a very perfect individual. For somebody that's like that and has been in this area most of their life, um, you you have to understand that you're going to have to follow and you're going to have to care and you're going to have to truly love the people around you, because you're going to need a lot of understanding.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
when you have people in your charge and that are around you and in your circle, I think I have to lead that way. There are some generals that can get out there and be on the lead horse, and I love those kind of people. You guys had the colonel on the other day, and I feel like he's that type of guy. That guy, I appreciate what he does and the story I heard him talk about, and the challenges. Just being challenged at 15 like he was to be an officer. But I don't think I'm that individual. I want to be the moving force going forward, and I want to be in the middle of it. But I want to be bringing people along with me, and I love to be that way. If that's leading, then that's what I want to do.
I love it. That's good. Are you a success?
Uh, yes, and I will say this. I don't. I'm looking. I didn't see any $100 bills that dropped on the way in here, but
we've never had a guest
I'm
drop $100 bills when we walk in.
But remind me to look.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not underfed. I've got a great family. I've got great friends. I have a great roof over my head, and I enjoy what I do. And from what I see and what I deal with on a daily basis, and what I see out there, to survive in this area is one thing, but to enjoy what you do and to look back and we talk about my family, just as I'm speaking with you guys today about it, to realize I've never had a job that I didn't enjoy. We didn't talk about it, but when I was in Kirbyville, the first job I ever had was working at a pig farm.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And right down the road. But even from that job, you know what I mean? Doing something, accomplishing something, working with people. I've never had a job that I can remember where I woke up and went, I don't want to go to work today. Now, before I grew up, there were times I didn't go to work, but that was laziness. But that's one of those things. I've never had that happen. And there's been so many people out there that hadn't. And I think that drives me to instill upon the leaders I work with and the leader I try to be is don't make any more of those people.
Yeah.
There's enough of them out there.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I see that as a success.
You mentioned like those early jobs, teams. You just mentioned on the farm and all that. So, if you will, just you're a writer. You have that broad thought. Imagine you're talking to some young folks. Maybe they're 15, 16, 18, 19. And if you could take a few phrases to give them your best influence to say this type way of thinking, approaching, and doing is going to be really your best assets, what would you tell them?
I'm gonna give you the first piece of advice, and I'm gonna tell you in the exact way it was told to me, close, without the colorful language. The first thing is, don't ever, 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 ever pass up the chance to shut the heck up and listen.
Amen, brother. Preach. I felt it. That was it. That's it.
And here's why.
That was good stuff.
That is.
As young people, and I was just talking to some in Bridge City today, I feel that when I was younger, and I can actually still remember that far back, my biggest fear was like they were going to think that I didn't know anything, and I wanted to prove that. And man, we don't expect you. We already give you a pass on that, and I don't think young people know that enough.
No.
You have a pass on knowledge. We don't expect that.
Yeah.
Here's what we love. We would love for somebody just to listen for a minute. You know what I mean? And just have some understanding, and go do what we ask you to do. You know what I mean? We're not trying to get you hurt. We're not trying, unless it's something crazy, just follow through with it. And then after you've done it a couple of times, come talk to us, and have a conversation with us.
Bring some feedback.
And offer some feedback.
Right.
I love that. Whether it's young or whatever, to come back, not in the heat of battle, not when you're down there and you're working through it and everything, but have a little bit of feedback. That would really help. The other thing is show up to work. I had a big struggle with that, man. Once I got some money in my pocket, I was like, I didn't have to worry about 2 days. I didn't have bills, paid for a raggedy truck. That's a bad thing. Don't fall into that habit. When you go from not having a whole lot of money to making blue collar construction money, you know what I mean? That all of a sudden you've got a couple paychecks in there. What happens is you start calling in sick. You can start getting them Monday morning blues and things like that. Don't fall into that trap. And then the last thing, the very last thing has to do with a couple things. But one is there's an adage out there that I don't agree with, that you shouldn't make friends at work. You shouldn't care about the people you work with. This is a job. You care about your family. You do everything else, but we're just here to work. I totally 100% disagree with that. Care about the people you work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Care about how they are. When you bond with somebody, when you care about what they are, when you ask questions, when you do things like that, you're not only become a better employee, you're affecting change in somebody else's life.
Yes.
And as young people, they have the ability, and they haven't been turned cold by the world yet. You know what I mean? They haven't had to live through those experiences, hopefully, and they're fresh. And as adults, we shouldn't try to squash that energy and stuff, so take that and care about the people you're working with. And the last thing is, don't fall into the trap of taking offense. It's called taking offense for a reason. You have to take that. People can't give you the offense. And it's easier said than done. I am guilty of it just like anybody else is. But I feel like young people fall into that because people put a lot of pressure on being young these days. And you don't always have the best influences.
Yeah.
We look at the influence we had when it was my age, and it was your neighbors and your family and your people at school. That was about it. I watched people on TV for entertainment.
Right.
I didn't watch them and think
you wasn't trying to live like them.
Right.
You just wanted to,
or songs or anything.
Right.
I didn't, So today, man, everybody wants to be influencers. Everybody wants to do that. Don't take those to heart. You know what I mean? Look deep into yourself. Talk to the trusted people that you have with you, and understand that everything out there is not out to get you. The world's not built there. Yeah. You watch the news, you watch other things on social media, man, there's a lot of crazy things out there. But you start talking to people next door to you, you go to the restaurants, you talk to your friends and your family, and you'll find what the real world is.
There's a lot of goodness out here.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
We're drawing to a close, and it's been a wonderful interview. It's been our honor to have you with us.
Appreciate the opportunity.
There's a question that we ask. It's a tradition on our show. It's what we ask to close. But before I do that, is there anything that we didn't ask that we should have? Is there anything you'd like to throw out to the audience? There's no pressure, but if there's any message you'd like to send,
there is pressure.
You've got. This is the part where you've got 30 minutes just to talk.
30 minutes.
No.
Man, no pressure at all. I will say this. We talked about a lot of things about my life and about all the other things and the people in it. But, Southeast Texas as a whole, we didn't talk about the economics piece of it. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this. It is an exciting time in this bubble that we live in. We talk about it with at the Golden Triangle Industrial Group meetings, but it's not just the industrial world. It's the real estate folks are excited
That's
for
right.
what's going, not just because rates going down. I mean, they're excited for a lot of reasons, but everybody out there, the buzz about what's happening, the whole state of Texas.
That's right.
What's happening in Central Texas with all the manufacturing stuff, pipeline work, the alternative energy. I know that sometimes there's an agenda where they push and they say, well, it's going to be all solar or all wind or all whatever. Yeah, okay. Well, there's always going to be agendas out there. But man, look at what alternative energy can do for oil and gas when they work together.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Look how it can clean some of the things up. Look what oil and gas has done since there's a little bit of talk and competition. You know what I mean? A good competition and good capitalism.
That's right.
Can drive, and iron sharpens iron.
That's right.
And I think the oil and gas industry has done a good job of answering the call. They're like, oh, we got some competition now. Let's answer. And man, the things that they've come up with. You look at the hydrogen projects, the ammonia projects that are out there.
Yes.
The contractors that work for the oil and gas, the plants, the chemical plants, they can work for these other facilities.
That's right.
And just to learn a little bit about what's going on in this area, it's exciting. We take it for granted. I took a trip to Rhode Island, out to Block Island off of Rhode Island, and we were out there, and they had a rainy day. Drove out there, windy, rain. Actually, it was the hurricane was coming up that way, and man, the whole island was just about shut down. There was like, well, it was a tough day because it was rainy, and I was like, oh, hurricane got y'all shut down? Well, no, anytime it rains or gets a little cloudy, we just have a bad day on the island. And I was like, are you kidding me? And these people weren't second jobs. These were people that mom and pop said that was their income, was owning this ice cream shop or owning this boutique.
What?
We just don't.
That's so foreign to us around here.
We have rainout days, but usually that's to catch your breath around here. It's like, hey, we've been working 20
Thank God for
yeah. Right. I think we take that for granted.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's something we didn't touch on, but that is important to the folks that live here, whether you're, it's kind of those layers we talk about, or the ripples in the pond, but whether you're the construction company that's doing the work for the facilities here, or say you're the donut shops that are feeding the guys and the gals that are working in these plants.
It's all connected.
It's all connected all the way through. So we are a very blessed community. And I think if you don't go outside this community a lot, or you don't look at that in an aspect when you're traveling, I challenge you to do that. And it is amazing what happens whenever the sun doesn't shine, or it's raining, or something else happens.
Yeah.
So,
such a big impact.
I've often said, because obviously I've talked to young people last night, and we get a chance to do that. I said, you don't really have to leave. A lot of them just want to go.
Yes.
And there may be a reason, like you going to Houston to kind of help redefine yourself a little bit, and that's okay. But I tell them, I said, there's two kinds of work in our area. There's industry, and then there's industry support. Yes. I said, what's that? And they go, I don't know, that's your coach, that's your dentist, that's your donut shop.
You're right.
I said, so that means there is a job here for you. I said, and as long as those cloud makers are still pumping them out, then it's still here. That is the gold mine. And you can either work in the gold mine, or you can work to support the gold mine. Which would you prefer? And they're like, I don't know. So you'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll use Bechtel as an example, because they have been really good about coming to our meetings and talking to us about things. They're like, hey, we want to put a supplier show together. We're going to give you a list of things that we want. And even though I work with them all the time, I didn't realize, hey, we need pencils and we need pens and we need paper and we need things that I'm like, okay, so an office supply store would love to deal with this. You know what I mean? Or things like signs or T-shirts or, hey, who's your caterers? Things like that sometimes we don't think about. You know what I mean? So those kind of things, it can make or break what's happening. You may deal with wedding venues, or you may make flowers for certain events, but what if they're catering an event and they need you to build like 40 arrangements real quick? Well, that could make or break a month or 2 months for somebody that does flower arrangements, things like that. So lots of things like that they can inject into, and have injected for many years in the area. That's great about where we work and live.
That's amazing.
It is.
Well, like I said before, it's been an honor to have you with us.
Absolutely. I enjoy it.
The final question that we ask all our guests to close the show is, if you could go back in time and you could give yourself, the younger you, the not quite grown man you, before you entered into the world of, all the things that you've become, if you could give yourself some advice, just whisper in your own ear, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, keep that He-Man Castle Grayskull. It'll be worth a lot of money.
I was a big He-Man fan, boy. I sure was.
No, seriously, I think something that I would tell myself is to use a little bit more kindness. I think, I talked about and picked a little bit about, being a skinnier and not the, I mean, it was the 80s, man. We were all kind of ugly. Look at those pictures. But, you look at that and
he ain't wrong.
And I did have to go through that a little bit. I found humor as a way to deal with that. And it's great when people find humor, but humor tends to start out as getting laughs, and then it can get mean real quick. And I think that is what happened with me. Is there are a lot of times that I wish I was a lot more kind to people.
That's profound. I really like that.
Well, I look back, and when you have kids and you have grandkids and everything else, you start looking back and you're like, man, what are they going to see? Who's going to tell them what story? How am I going to use this as a lesson?
Right.
So it is one of those things I look back several times and I'm like, that's got to be the thing where I'm like, I should have been a lot more kind in a lot of situations.
That's good.
That's great, man.
I remember telling my kids would have issues with people at school, so I'm going to reference you in this. I said, you don't have to be their friend. You know that. And they're like, I know. I go, but you got to be friendly.
Yes, that's great. That's good stuff.
Yeah, and they would get it, eventually. They didn't want to because they were upset. I said, it's okay. It will pay off. And it always did. It always did.
Hey, I get it. I've had talks with kids before and conflict resolution. I love. Everybody's like, what do you mean love conflict? Everybody's scared of conflict. And I'm like, oh, I love it. Like, what are you talking about? I was like, I kind of wish people would still fight. And they're like, what do you can't say that.
I'm right there with you, babe. I really do.
I said, when we were younger, you did not fight to annihilate somebody.
No.
You know what I mean? Matter of fact, if you made somebody bleed, you were probably fighting and then crying and hugging necks and everything.
That's right.
All that stuff boils down to the kindness piece of it. And there's a lot of things that, whether you're talking about a backyard brawl, whether you're talking about friends, whether you're talking about work, or whether you're talking about politics, there's a lot of people that I visit with that say, hey, politics used to be you had a polished individual and they stood up there and they did everything else. We appreciate that we have real people, but there are some things that we would like to see change. Like we would love to see a little bit of kindness back in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think there's anything I can think of that I wouldn't like to see a little bit more kindness out there. And I'm not talking about mamsy-pamsy, butterflies and rainbows.
No, just empathy, man.
I'm talking about real, true empathy. And you took the words right out of my mouth. It's something I spoke about at a BBB Brunch and Learn. Was true empathy. I've never had a discussion where I had to feel like I didn't have to be manly. And that's not like it was like I had to put away who I was. I was just genuine. And I said, I have never been through what you are. But what I can tell is I can see you're hurting right now. And that hurts me because I don't like to see people that way. If you open up somebody like that in the very beginning like that, and you talk to somebody, anything else you can talk about is solvable.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I've been guilty of it a lot of times. I feel like I've been hard-headed and stubborn and possibly obstinate in the beginning like that have stopped some of those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it didn't have to be that way if I would have been empathetic and kind in the beginning.
That's good.
That's profound stuff, man.
Very.
Well, Chuck, did you have anything else that you'd like to ask?
Thank you. Thank you for taking us the journey and introducing us to Mom, Dad, and Grandpa, and then all these other folks that have been your influence.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for taking on the best of them and becoming who you are. We
Very
appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah, thank y'all very much.
Quite the influence in our area. We appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Good.
Well, guys out there, thank you for being our audience. Thank you for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we've had with us
Elton Hollis.
Y'all go find his book on Amazon. Make them sell out if that's even possible.
He's
Buy
got
one,
two
buy
under his
two. This
desk.
way to be a great Christmas gift, guys.
Yeah, just wipe the dust right off it.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
In pursuit of your purpose, ask yourself, what is